Hello everyone. Before we dive into tonight's accounts, I have a small request. If you find yourself looking over your shoulder or feeling that chill down your spine while listening, please hit the like button and subscribe. It's the best way to support the channel and ensures that these stories keep coming your way. I also want to hear from you. Drop a comment letting me know where in the world you're watching from and exactly what time it is for you. After college, my friend group scattered the way friend groups do. Different cities, different jobs, different versions of life that don't leave much room for the things you used to do together. We'd camped a lot in those years. Nothing serious. Just long weekends when someone had a car and nobody had anything better going on. When that stopped being possible, I kept going, just alone. There was a site on the eastern edge of the Cherokee National Forest in Tennessee that our group had used a handful of times. Nothing spectacular about it. No dramatic views, no waterfall, no reason to go out of your way unless you knew it was there. It sat on a flat wooded shelf above a small creek, well off the main trail system, accessed by an unmarked spur that most people walked past without noticing. That's why we liked it. That's why I kept going back. The kind of place that stays empty because there are easier options everywhere else. I got there on a Friday afternoon in late September. 2-hour drive, 40-minute hike in, the last stretch following the creek until the shelf opened up through the trees. I'd done it enough times that my legs remembered it without me thinking too much. Set up my tent on the flat ground above the creek bank, got my gear sorted, started a small fire. The trees were just beginning to turn, and the light that afternoon had that particular quality that late September gets in the southern Appalachians. Amber and slanted, and making everything look better than it probably is. I was maybe an hour into settling in when I noticed the man. He came in from the main trail direction, moving at an easy pace, and found a spot on the opposite side of the site without saying anything. Which was fine. Plenty of people don't want to talk. What I noticed was the pack. Small, the kind you'd take on a day hike, nothing strapped to the outside of it. No tent visible, no sleeping pad, no sign of anything you'd need for an overnight. He sat down on a log and just kind of stayed there. I didn't make much of it. Maybe he was waiting out some weather before heading back. Maybe he just wanted to sit somewhere quiet for a while. I've been in the woods enough to know that people use them for all kinds of reasons, and most of those reasons are completely ordinary. I kept to my side of the site, he kept to his, and the afternoon moved along. Around 6, I walked down to the creek to fill my water filter, and when I came back up, he was gone. The light was almost gone too by then. The trail out takes a good while, and it wasn't the kind of terrain you want to be on in full dark without knowing it well. I registered his leaving as a mild curiosity, and then let it go. Made my dinner, ate sitting by the fire while it burned down, watched the last of the light leave the sky above the tree line. I turned in around 9, tired from the drive and the hike, the kind of tired that comes on fast when you're finally somewhere quiet. I went out quickly and slept hard. I don't know what time it was when the sound woke me up. Footsteps. Close enough that I could hear them on the dry leaves covering the ground. That specific crunch and settle of weight moving through leaf litter. I lay still in my sleeping bag for a second, genuinely not sure if I was hearing it or dreaming it. Then I heard it again. Deliberate steps moving across the site, slowing as they got closer to my tent. Then they stopped. I reached for my lantern without sitting up, found it by feel, and clicked it on. unzipped the tent door enough to look out. There was a man standing about 20 feet away. Same build, same jacket as the man from the afternoon. Standing on the far side of the dead fire pit, completely still. Not moving toward me, not moving away. Just standing there in the dark on the edge of my lantern light. I called out, asked if he was all right. The words came out steadier than I felt, which surprised me. He didn't answer, didn't move. I couldn't tell which direction he was facing. The lantern light reached him, but not well, and his face was in shadow. That uncertainty, not knowing if he was looking at me or looking at something else, sat badly. Both possibilities felt wrong in different ways. I reached back into the tent and got my knife from the front pocket of my pack. Not that I had any kind of plan involving it. It just felt like the right thing to have in my hand. I sat in the tent door and watched him, and he stood there, and whatever was happening between us in those 15 minutes, I still couldn't fully describe. He wasn't threatening me directly. He wasn't doing anything. He was just standing in the dark at the edge of the site in the middle of the night, at a campsite that almost nobody knew existed, and not responding to the sound of my voice. Then he turned and walked away, back toward the main trail, the same direction he'd gone when he left before dark. The footsteps got quieter as the leaves got further away, and then there was just the creek sound and the forest. Here's the thing that settled in after the sound of him was gone. When he turned to leave, I could see from the way he was standing which direction he'd been facing the whole time. He'd been looking directly at my tent, the whole 15 minutes. Standing in the dark, looking at me while I sat there with a lantern and a pocket knife, trying to figure out what he was. I stayed awake until it was light enough to see properly. Packed up fast, hiked out, drove home without stopping. I've thought about it a lot since, about what he was doing there, about what the small day pack meant, about whether the fact that I turned the lantern on and sat visible in the door of my tent was the thing that made him leave, or whether he was always going to leave, and I was never going to know what the alternative was. I don't camp alone anymore. That's the most honest thing I can tell you about how that night ended. I'm not a serious outdoorsman, never have been. I camp the way some people take drives, just to get out of my own head for a few days, somewhere quiet, somewhere without a screen in front of my face. I don't push deep into backcountry, don't do technical trails, don't need to prove anything to anyone out there. A mile or two from the trailhead is usually my limit, and that suits me fine. There's a lake in the Daniel Boone National Forest in Kentucky that I'd been going to for a few years. Small, tucked in, the kind of place that doesn't make it onto the popular lists. The trail in is just over 1.5 miles, and it's gentle enough that I never felt like I was working too hard. I'd camp on the north bank, where a flat section of ground sits back from the water behind a line of old hemlocks. Good fire pit already established, a view of the lake through the trees, far enough from the trail that the occasional day hiker didn't bother me. It was the closest thing I had to a regular spot. I was 3 days into a 4-day trip when this happened. On the third morning, I hiked back out to my truck to grab my fishing gear and an extra bag of food I'd left in the cab. Nothing unusual about that. The walk out was easy, the trail empty both ways. I was back at camp within 2 hours. And when I came back down the north bank and got my first clear view of my site, there was a tent set up further along the lake edge that hadn't been there when I left. Small tent, green, staked properly like someone who knew what they were doing. Nobody visible around it. I'd been the only person on that trail all morning, both directions. I hadn't passed anyone coming in, and I hadn't seen anyone at the trailhead when I was at my truck. There was no other maintained access to this section of the lake that I knew of, though I'd never ruled out the possibility of another way in through the forest. I set up my rod on the bank and started fishing. Good afternoon for it. Overcast sky, light wind off the water, the kind of conditions that usually produce something. Every so often I looked down the bank toward the green tent. Nobody appeared. The whole afternoon, not once. The tent just sat there, zipped up with nothing happening around it. When the light started going, I packed up the rod and went back to my site. Made food, collected some wood from the hemlock stand, got a fire going. The lake had gone dark by then, and the trees behind the campsite were black shapes against a slightly lighter sky. Right as the fire caught and the light started spreading out from the pit, I saw movement in the trees ahead of me. A shadow beyond the reach of the firelight, moving between the trunks. Just the one. I assumed it was whoever belonged to the tent down the bank, maybe out collecting wood of their own. A little close to my site maybe, but not impossible. I settled back into my chair and let the fire do what fires do. The lake, the sky, the sound of the water. I was so relaxed I was half asleep, sitting up. Then I looked up and there were figures coming out of the tree line. Not one, 4 of them. Walking directly toward my campsite in a loose line, coming out of the dark forest into the edge of the firelight, and I sat up straight and watched them come. I told myself it was a group from somewhere else on the lake, lost maybe, needing directions or a lighter. I told myself that right up until they were close enough that I could see their faces in the firelight. 4 men, 30s, 40s, hard to say exactly. None of them said anything, not a word. They walked into my campsite like they'd decided something before they arrived, and the deciding was already done. 2 of them went directly past me to my tent. The other 2 positioned themselves on either side of me and started moving me back. Not grabbing, just pressure. Bodies directing me away from the fire, away from my gear, toward the dark tree line behind the site. I tried talking to them, asked what they wanted, told them to take whatever they needed. I kept my voice as steady as I could manage. They didn't respond. Didn't even look at me while I was speaking. The 2 at my tent were going through everything methodically, and the 2 beside me kept walking me backward into the trees. The firelight got smaller behind me. The trees closed in. After maybe a minute of this, I could barely make out the shapes of my tent and the fire pit through the trunks. We were well off the campsite by then. We stopped. I turned to face them, and in the dark, away from the fire, one of them reached towards something at his side. I ran. No decision involved. My body made it before my brain did. I just went through the trees, crashing through undergrowth, following the slope of the ground because I knew the trail was downhill from the campsite. I'd running as hard as I've ever run in my life, with nothing but the sound of my own feet in the leaves and my own breathing and the absolute terror of not knowing if there were footsteps behind me. I hit the trail, followed it out, got to the trailhead parking area and got into my truck and drove to the road and kept driving until I found a gas station with lights on. Nobody had followed me out. I don't know why. I called the police from the gas station. They went in the next morning. My tent was still there, sliced open, everything gone. The green tent further down the bank had vanished. No identification, no physical evidence, nothing that led anywhere. I still don't know who those 4 men were, or where they came from, or what was going to happen in those trees. if I'd stayed one more second before running. I'm just glad I didn't stay to find out. This happened when I was 13. I'm in my 30s now, and I still think about it more than I probably should. Not constantly, not in a way that runs my life, but it's one of those memories that sits close to the surface and comes back without warning sometimes, usually at night. We were on a week-long camping trip in the Appalachian foothills of western Georgia, about 30 kids total from our scout troop, plus a handful of adult leaders. The campsite sat on a wide, flat ridge above a river valley. A proper organized camp with designated tent areas, a central fire pit, a cooking station. The kind of setup that feels completely safe when you're 13 because adults are nearby and everything is structured and nothing bad is supposed to happen at a scout camp in the mountains. That's the thing about being 13, and you still believe that proximity to adults means safety. Tent assignments were made by the leaders, and I ended up grouped with my friend Caleb and a kid I'll call Marcus. I didn't know Marcus well. He was from a different part of the troop, newer, and the first thing I noticed about him was that he was always trying to get a reaction out of someone, picking arguments over nothing, talking over people, showing off. The kind of kid whose energy has a static quality to it. You never quite relax around them because you never know when something is going to spark. The knife thing stood out. He had several of them, a folding knife, a fixed blade on his belt, a smaller one he kept in his boot, and he brought them up constantly, showed them to people who didn't ask, talked about them the way some kids talk about video games or sports. None of the leaders seemed particularly concerned about it, or if they were, they didn't act on it. And at 13, I didn't have the framework to understand what that combination of things, the aggression, the need for an audience, the fixation on the knives, actually added up to. The trip was 3 days in when it happened. Caleb and I were in the tent after lights out playing cards. Nothing dramatic about the evening leading up to it. Dinner, some time around the fire, the usual stuff. Marcus was in the tent with us, and I honestly can't remember what I said that set him off. Something during the card game, something that probably wasn't even intended as an insult. But he went from 0 to furious in the space of about 2 seconds. Loud enough that one of the adult leaders called from the next tent over and told us to shut it down and get to sleep. So we did. Lights off, cards put away. I was asleep within minutes. The mountain air and the full days of activity knocked you out fast on those trips. I don't know how long I was out before I woke up. The first thing I registered was pressure, not sound, not movement, not a dream. Pressure around my throat, tight and focused, and the immediate overwhelming confusion of being pulled out of deep sleep into something that made no sense yet. My eyes were open, but the tent was dark, and nothing was processing correctly. I couldn't understand what was on top of me. I couldn't understand why I couldn't pull air in. I started thrashing. Pure reflex, no strategy. Just my body trying to get out from under whatever had me. My hands were finding arms, a torso, and I was pulling and pushing and twisting. But I couldn't get leverage, and I couldn't get a breath, and the panic of that, the specific panic of needing air and not being able to get it, is something I can't adequately describe. Your body stops caring about anything else. Everything narrows down to one thing. The tent was getting dark. I know how that sounds, and I also know it was real. The darkness coming in from the edges of my vision, my chest burning, my head starting to separate from what was happening in a way that felt almost peaceful for a second, before it terrified me more than anything else. I could hear laughing, close, above me, laughing in a way that didn't sound like a prank or a joke. It sounded like enjoyment. I was fading. That's the only word for it. I was actually fading, and I knew it, and I couldn't stop it. Then Caleb hit him. I don't know exactly what Caleb used. His fist, his elbow, his whole body coming across the tent in the dark. Whatever it was, it connected hard enough that the pressure on my throat released all at once, and I was pulling air in before I even understood I could. Coughing and breathing at the same time, my throat feeling like something had been rearranged inside it, my whole chest heaving. Marcus came off me, and Caleb kept going, not stopping, not giving him space to recover or reach for anything. Just hitting him until Marcus was against the tent wall, making sounds that weren't laughing anymore. Caleb screamed for help. The adults were there fast. Tent unzipped, flashlights, voices. The sudden invasion of adult presence that I had been 13 feet away from this whole time. Marcus was pulled out. There was yelling at him, not at us, which was something. They moved him to a solo tent pitched directly between two of the adult leader tents for the remainder of the trip. Close enough that someone would hear anything before it got far. Nobody called it what it was that night. Not in front of us anyway. The adults used careful language, altercation, incident, behavior, and the next morning things resumed with the particular forced normalcy of adults who have decided that keeping the group functioning is the priority. We finished the trip. We drove home. Parents were told something. I don't know exactly what version. Caleb and I didn't talk about it much for the rest of the week. We'd moved to a different tent with different kids, and we both just let the days fill in around what had happened without examining it directly. That's what you do when you're 13 and you don't have the words for something yet. What I know now that I didn't know then is how close the margin was. How quickly that kind of darkness comes in. How little time there actually is between the moment something starts and the moment it's too late to stop it. Caleb woke up because of the struggling and the laughing. Two sounds that combined in the dark to wake him up in time. If either of those had been quieter, or if he'd been a heavier sleeper, or if he'd taken 10 more seconds to understand what he was hearing before he moved. I don't finish that thought. There's no point finishing it. What I do know is that I've never taken for granted since that night the particular luck of having the right person in the right place at the right moment. Most of the time, we don't get to know how close things came. Most of the time, the margin stays invisible. I got to see mine.